Thank you, thank you, Mr. Speaker. John Key said that long hours at work, both parents in employment, childcare shortages, growing interest rates and rising bills can create a far from ideal environment for good parenting and family relationships. Now, we agree with that. He's absolutely right. So if so, why is the government advocating for longer hours at work by allowing workers to cash up their 4th week's holiday? By keeping both parents in work, because the fact is they're not getting pay increases, so many will be attracted to it, and also refusing to address the issues that we have around the long work hours culture in New Zealand. Now, this bill, in conjunction with the Employment Relations Act, Bill number 2 that we just passed this afternoon, to the shame of this Parliament, the removal of the meals and rest breaks legislation that's on the order paper, are contributing to a clawback of long-standing employment rights and entitlements. And what it does, along with those other bills, Mr. Speaker, is it treats workers as untrustworthy, it removes existing protections and it weakens previous gains in working conditions. Now, Labor brought in significant improvements to the holidays in the Holidays Act 2003. I know the National Party voted against it, and particularly the 4th week's annual leave. But just to recap on that, in the Holidays Act 2003, first of all, the purpose of the Holidays Act is to promote balance, that word balance, between work and other aspects of workers' lives. And Labor brought in the 4th week's annual leave for rest and recreation. That's the purpose of the leave, not for money. It brought in paid public holidays and pay them at time and a half where a worker has to work, plus a day off, and 5 days of sick leave a year after 6 months' employment, and bereavement leave as well. Now, of course, what this is doing, we only got the 4th week's annual leave, the 4th week's extra leave, after, in 2003, Australia's had it since 1974, Mr. Speaker. It took 30 years for people to win, for workers to win an extra 4th week's leave, and now here it is up for grabs, and I'll get into that a little bit more as I get into my speech. I also want to comment on the Ministerial Advisory Group that the Minister referred to, because she made it sound like there was a large level of agreement on that group. Now, there was a little bit of agreement, and it was a Ministerial Advisory Group that had both various people, CTU and Business New Zealand and so on it, but there was a whole lot of things that they didn't agree on. The only things they agreed on was the provision around transferring a public holiday to another day of cultural significance, although the caveat of that is that from the CTU is there must be adequate protections to ensure that where that happens, the worker working on the actual public holiday must be paid time and a half, and that's not used as a reason to avoid that. Now, I'm not confident actually that those protections are there. They also agreed that there would be no change to the treatment of public holidays. Well, there is. And they also agreed that there would be no change to the treatment and entitlements of casual employees. Well, that's good. But they did not agree on the cash-up of annual holidays. They did not agree with that. They did not agree on the formula around average daily pay. They didn't agree on a whole range of other things, including making Easter Sunday another holiday, just as a matter of interest. So this idea that this bill flowed from the Ministerial Working Group is completely untrue. And the problem with it is that it's based on, apart from the research that was done during the Ministerial Advisory Group, it's based on really poor data. And Trevor Mallett has referred to the regulatory impact statement and the real holes in that. And the difficulties that her department had in trying to find any evidence for some of the provisions that are in this bill. Now, I just want to go back to the 4th week's leave and why we have an issue about the cash-up. I can understand why any worker would be attracted to the idea of getting paid for 53 weeks and working 52, particularly in this environment where there has been zero or very low pay increases. I can understand that, but the problem is that leave is not a commodity. It should not be up for sale. And once it is up for sale, it will be vulnerable workers, it will weaken that 4 weeks provision. So over time, it won't become a 4 weeks leave, it'll become something that's now part of your salary and so on. I know the protections are written in there, but it's being chipped away, Mr Speaker. We will lose this 4 weeks leave that was fought for 30 years. Now, as I said, that's why we're opposed to it. I understand why people think a little bit of extra cash, but I think that's quite a shameful situation for us to be in, where people can't afford to spend time with their families. They need the cash. They want to spend the extra money that they'll get from the 4 weeks leave. So that's my objection to that. And I think the other objection too is that a lot of people work very, very hard over the years to win a 4 weeks annual leave. It didn't come about because, Labor did it in the end, but there were lots of people that campaigned for it for many, many years. And just like paid parental leave, eventually we got there, but there were women that campaigned on that for many, many years. Now, I remember with paid parental leave, when the government thought, that government and the National Party at the time thought it should be cashed up. Remember the baby bonus idea? That people didn't have to take leave to look after their baby, which is what paid parental leave's about. They could actually cash it up because they might need to buy a few extra nappies. Now, minimum conditions are supposed to be minimum conditions. Workers can negotiate extra holidays. If they want to cash those up, that's fine, but the minimum entitlement of New Zealand workers should not be undermined by this provision. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the public holidays and how that's being undermined. And the first thing, Mr Speaker, is around the alternate holiday, where effectively under this bill, the employer gets to decide if there can't be any agreement. The employer has 2 weeks and they get to decide when their alternative holiday will be. Well, that's really, really unfair. Under current provisions, they have a year to try and reach agreement because they've got a year to take it. And what I can see happening is families being forced to work on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, as many workers are, and having to take the day off at a time not of their choosing when their family are either on holiday or back at work. Again, going back to what John Key said, both parents and employment, childcare shortages, low pay, etc. This is going to be in addition to the problem. The third thing I want to just touch on, Mr Speaker, is the whole area of sick leave and this really silly provision in this bill about requiring a sick note for the first day's illness. Now, nobody can tell us where that came from. It certainly didn't come through the Ministerial Advisory Group. It wasn't raised at all. It was definitely not raised. There was no advice from the Department of Labour of that. No one asked for it as far as we can tell. It doesn't seem to have been anything that was on anyone's minds. It just seems maybe it was Roger Douglas that said, let's make everybody have a sick note after one day, just like he did with the extension of the 90-day trial. Maybe it was Roger Douglas. Maybe the minister got rolled again. But look, there's plenty of data out there about this that the Minister doesn't seem to have considered. For example, the 2009 National Employers' Wage and Salary Survey, which looked at 593 employers with 38,000 employees and found the average number of sick days that New Zealanders took in the preceding 12 months was 4.6 days. So we don't have a problem with illness. In fact, what we have, as we saw from the report from the Treasury last week, is a problem with people going to work when they're ill. Now, when we were worrying about things, now we've got through this swine flu, thank goodness, but there will be another pandemic come along one day. How on earth are we going to prevent that? How do we prevent the spread of illness? How do we stop this happening when workers are simply, due to economic circumstances, going to be forced to go to work under this bill? Mr Speaker, this bill is a disgrace, and as my colleague Trevor Miller said, it's a damn shame that it's being considered today in its third reading, considering the awful situation we have on the West Coast.